Hey friend, welcome. If your mind is restless or you're just trying to drift off, you're in the right place. Tonight we're going to explore life itself, quietly, calmly, in a way that helps your thoughts soften and your body settle. Just lie back, let the day fade, and let's begin. Chapter 1. The question that refuses to die. Imagine you are lying in the dark at the end of a long day, listening to a quiet voice talk about the universe and your place in it. At some point, almost everyone reaches the same question. What is life, really? Not just your daily schedule or your to-do list, but the deeper thing underneath. What does it mean that you are alive, right now, breathing, thinking, feeling? It sounds like a simple question, but in biology and philosophy, it is one of the most stubborn questions we have. You might expect that science, with its microscopes, space telescopes, and gene sequencing machines, would have a precise, universally agreed definition of life. It does not. Biologists, chemists, and physicists use working definitions that are useful for particular tasks, but there is still no single definition that everyone accepts. That alone is already a clue. Life is not just one property. It is a cluster of properties, a pattern of behavior that shows up again and again in certain arrangements of matter. In everyday biology classes, life is often described through a set of traits. Living things are made of cells, maintain internal balance or homeostasis, use energy, grow, respond to their surroundings, reproduce, and over long stretches of time, they evolve. When you look at organisms on Earth, from bacteria to trees and animals, these properties appear together so consistently that they serve as a practical checklist. Modern biology resources summarize life as a combination of organization, energy use, regulation, responsiveness, growth, reproduction, and evolutionary adaptation working together in one system. Yet as soon as we try to turn these traits into a strict definition, problems appear. Some living organisms do not obviously fit every criterion at every moment. A sterile worker ant may never reproduce, and a dormant seed may show almost no visible metabolism for a long time. Yet we do not hesitate to call them alive. On the other side, fire spreads and consumes fuel, and crystals grow into ordered shapes, but we still class both as non-living. These edge cases show that any simple checklist will leave something important out. Because of these difficulties, scientists sometimes use more compact, abstract definitions. One influential working definition, especially in astrobiology, comes from a committee associated with a space agency program that studies the origin and distribution of life in the universe. They describe life as a self-sustaining chemical system capable of Darwinian evolution. In other words, to count as life, a system should maintain itself through internal chemistry and also be able to store information and change over generations through natural selection. This definition is powerful because it connects life directly to evolution, which is one of the most deeply tested theories in all of biology. It also gives scientists a tool for thinking about life that might not look like Earth life, such as hypothetical organisms on other planets that still process energy and evolve, even if their chemistry is different from our own. Even this elegant definition, however, is not perfect. It describes the phenomenon of life at the level of populations and lineages more clearly than at the level of individual organisms. A single human or a single oak tree does not evolve by itself. Evolution happens across many generations. Strictly read, a lonely, sterile organism that can no longer reproduce would not count as life. even though we would still call it alive. Researchers discussing this definition point out that it blurs the line between life as an ongoing process in the universe and particular living individuals that take part in that process. The fact that even such a carefully crafted definition runs into edge cases tells us something important. Life is not a simple category that can be captured in one short sentence. Looking at these examples, whether they involve complex organisms or puzzling entities like viruses and viroids, it becomes clear that life is not a sharp line, but more like a gradient. On one side, there are obviously living organisms with complex cells, tissues, and behaviors. On the other, there are clearly non-living systems like rocks or dust. In between, we find systems that borrow some of life's tricks without fully qualifying as independent living beings. That gradient matters when we ask whether we would recognize alien life if we found it, because our Earth-centered definitions may not fit neatly around every possible form that life could take in the universe. Another way to think about life comes from physics, and especially from thermodynamics, the study of energy and entropy. From that perspective, a living organism is an open system that maintains a very specific, ordered structure while surrounded by forces that constantly tend to increase disorder. Non-living systems left to themselves tend to drift toward equilibrium, a state in which nothing much happens. Living systems, by contrast, hold themselves far from equilibrium by taking in energy from their surroundings, using that energy to repair and build structure, and releasing waste heat back into the environment. In this view, life is not a special kind of substance, but a particular way of using energy to postpone decay. This thermodynamic picture does not replace the biological one. It complements it. When a cell uses energy to pump ions across a membrane, or a plant uses sunlight to link simple molecules into sugars, it is performing tiny acts of defiance against the general drift toward disorder. Over time, these acts form stable cycles of metabolism, growth, repair, and reproduction. One research tradition has even suggested that the emergence of life can be seen as a natural consequence of the tendency of non-equilibrium systems to find pathways that dissipate energy more efficiently. Seen that way, life is the universe discovering new, intricate ways to spread out energy and increase entropy overall, even while building pockets of local order. At the same time, life is deeply tied to information. The chemistry of living systems is organized around molecules like DNA and RNA that store instructions in their sequence of bases, telling cells how to build proteins and how to respond to changing conditions. Modern biology emphasizes that this information can be copied, altered, and selected over generations, giving rise to evolution. Some theorists that life itself can be seen as a self-maintaining information pattern that preserves itself by recruiting matter and energy, so that you are not only a collection of atoms, but also the pattern those atoms temporarily realize. When we put these pieces together, a richer picture of life begins to appear. Life is chemistry, but not just any chemistry. It is chemistry arranged into systems that are self-organized, energetically open, and information-rich. It involves boundaries, like cell membranes that separate an inside from an outside, but it also involves constant exchange across those boundaries. It requires stability, but also change. It depends on copying structures accurately enough to preserve function, yet loosely enough to allow variation and evolution. The reason it is so hard to give a single, neat definition is that life is doing many things at once. It is holding order, processing energy, storing information, and exploring possibilities else all together across enormous spans of time. At a human scale, though, the question, what is life, does not only point to cells, genes, and thermodynamics. It also points inward toward experience. A bacterium swimming toward a food source does not know that it is alive. You do. You can reflect on your own existence, imagine futures that have not happened yet, and wonder what your life means. Neuroscience describes your brain as an organ that integrates signals from the body and the environment, builds predictions, and updates its internal model. Awareness in this picture is a process emerging from networks of neurons exchanging electrical and chemical signals, an expression of life rather than something separate from it. There is also a quiet comfort in realizing that your personal question about life is part of a much larger pattern. For as long as humans have told stories, they have wondered what separates the living from the non-living and why living things eventually die. Today, biology, chemistry, and physics let us describe life in detailed, precise ways, but they do not close the question. Every definition highlights some aspects and leaves others in shadow. And every attempt to draw a sharp boundary is softened by new discoveries. Perhaps then, the most scientifically honest answer to the question, what is life, is that life is an ongoing process in which matter, energy, and information intertwine. It is a set of self-maintaining chemical systems that have, over billions of years, learned to copy themselves, vary, and evolve. It is a thermodynamic dance that keeps certain structures far from equilibrium for a while. It is an informational memory that passes from generation to generation, trying out new forms. And in your case, it is the gentle awareness that you are here, listening, breathing, and feeling. You do not need to solve the whole mystery tonight. The cells in your body will keep carrying out their chemistry whether or not you can define life perfectly. Your heart will keep beating, your lungs will keep moving air, and your brain will keep quietly adjusting its patterns as you drift toward rest. Life knows how to be life without putting it into words. So as you lie there, you can let the question soften. You are part of this vast, intricate process that scientists are still trying to fully understand. You are not outside of life looking in. You are one expression of it for a short, bright moment in cosmic time. It is enough for now to feel your body sinking into the bed, to notice the slow rhythm of your breathing, and to allow the day to loosen its grip. The universe will keep carrying the question of life forward, but you can gently let it go for tonight and simply rest inside the quiet fact that you are alive. Chapter 2: Life as Chemistry, the Dance of Molecules. If you were to look at life from very far away, everything alive on Earth might seem impossibly diverse. A single-celled microbe drifting through a drop of water looks almost nothing like a redwood tree stretching toward the sky, and neither resembles a human being lying awake at night wondering what life is. But if you zoom in far enough, if you set aside the shapes and forms, something remarkable appears. All living things, from the smallest bacterium to the largest animal, rely on the same deep chemical foundations. Life is not built from exotic matter or secret substances. It is built from ordinary atoms arranged in patterns that make something extraordinary possible. At its simplest, life is chemistry in motion. This idea is central to modern biology and is described across many foundational scientific sources. The atoms themselves are unremarkable: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and a few supporting elements. These atoms form molecules that interact in intricate but lawful ways, governed by the same physical principles that guide every chemical reaction in the universe. What makes life unique is not the raw ingredients, but the way they are arranged and the way they react together in extremely controlled and coordinated networks. Molecules inside a living cell behave differently from molecules drifting freely in the ocean or floating in space because they are part of a self-sustaining system that continually maintains its own structure. To understand life as chemistry, imagine a single living cell. It is small, but within that tiny space unfold countless reactions every second. Not one of these reactions is alive on its own. A protein molecule cannot decide what to do. A strand of DNA does not have goals or intentions. A lipid bilayer does not try to protect anything. But when these molecules come together in the right arrangement, they form a system that behaves in a way no individual molecule ever could. This is why biology textbooks describe life as an emergent property of interacting molecules. The living state emerges from non-living components when they are arranged in such a way that they create feedback, organization, and self-regulation. One of the central chemical principles behind life is metabolism, the set of chemical reactions that allow a cell to take in energy and matter from the environment, transform them, and use them to maintain its structure. In living organisms, metabolic reactions are not random. They form cycles and pathways, each reaction feeding into the next. These pathways are controlled by enzymes, which are specialized proteins that speed up specific chemical reactions. Enzymes make life possible because they allow reactions to happen fast enough and in a precise enough sequence for complex structures to be built and maintained. If you picture the inside of a cell, the biochemical reactions happening there are not quiet or static. They are more like a bustling molecular city. Molecules enter and exit through selective channels in the membrane. Fuel molecules are broken down to release usable energy. That energy drives the construction of new proteins, new lipids, and new strands of DNA. Damaged molecules are dismantled and recycled. Signals move through the cell in the form of ions, small molecules, or chemical modifications. All of this is chemistry, but it is chemistry arranged in a self-sustaining loop. A key feature that distinguishes living chemical systems from non-living ones is that living systems are far from equilibrium. In non-living systems, if the environment remains stable, chemical reactions eventually settle into a state in which nothing much changes. But a cell must never reach equilibrium. If it did, it would die. Instead, it constantly pumps energy through its reactions to keep renewing the chemical gradients that allow it to function. This perspective is widely discussed in biochemistry and biophysics, where life is often described as a steady flow of energy and matter through an organized system. Energy flow is not just a supporting detail in this story, it is the heart of it. Living molecules are arranged in such a way that they require a continuous supply of energy to remain organized. Without energy, complex molecules degrade, membranes fall apart, and DNA becomes damaged. This is why life on Earth ultimately depends on energy captured from sunlight, or in some deep-sea ecosystems, from chemical gradients in the environment. In both cases, the energy sources are converted into forms the cell can use, allowing it to maintain the delicate chemical structure required for living processes. Another essential aspect of life as chemistry is the way information is stored and used. Although the previous chapter explored life as information in a broader conceptual sense, here the focus narrows to the chemical properties of genetic material. DNA is not alive, yet it carries the instructions for building the proteins and structures that allow life to exist. It is a chemical polymer capable of storing information through the sequence of its bases. When a cell divides, this sequence is copied by enzymes that read and replicate the chemical structure with extraordinary precision, though not perfect precision. Small imperfections called mutations arise naturally, providing the raw material for evolution. The link between chemistry and information in biology is deeply intertwined with another remarkable molecule, RNA. Some scientists believe that early life on Earth may have used RNA not only to store information, but also to catalyze reactions, forming what is sometimes called an RNA world. In this theoretical scenario, RNA enabled the first self-replicating chemical systems before proteins and DNA took over their specialized roles. Whether or not this exact scenario occurred, the idea reflects a broader scientific consensus that the earliest life forms were likely chemical systems arising from simpler molecules that learned to copy themselves and sustain their own structure. Another crucial structure is the cell membrane, formed from molecules called lipids. A membrane is not just a passive barrier. It actively participates in the chemistry of life by controlling what enters and leaves the cell. The membrane creates a distinct interior where chemical reactions can occur without being diluted into the outside environment. It also maintains gradients of ions, which serve as energy stores and signaling tools. These gradients allow cells to generate electrical signals, transport nutrients, expel waste, and coordinate activity across large tissues in animals. All these chemical systems, enzymes, metabolic pathways, membranes, DNA, RNA, work together as a unified whole. None of them alone can perform the functions of life. Life appears only when they are integrated in a network that continually regenerates itself. This is why origins of life research focuses not only on molecules, but also on how molecules form interacting systems. Scientists studying the emergence of life investigate how simple organic molecules can form under natural conditions, how they can assemble into more complex structures, and how certain combinations of molecules can create feedback loops that stabilize and build upon themselves. The field is broad, ranging from laboratory simulations of early Earth conditions to studies of chemical evolution in environments like hydrothermal vents. Even though the details remain uncertain, the scientific consensus is that life began when chemistry became capable of self-maintenance and self-replication. Once a system has reached that threshold, it becomes able to evolve. Evolutionary change is not a chemical process in the traditional sense. It is a consequence of how chemical information is transmitted. When copies are made with small variations, and when some variations lead to more efficient chemical functioning, the system becomes able to refine itself over time. This refinement is not guided by intention, but by the natural differential survival of chemical systems. The molecules that copy more effectively become more common, and life slowly becomes more complex. Across all known life, there is also a striking unity of chemical machinery. The genetic code that maps DNA sequences to amino acids is nearly universal on Earth. The structure of ribosomes, the molecular machines that build proteins, is conserved across bacteria, plants, and animals. The same metabolic pathways, such as glycolysis and the citric acid cycle, appear everywhere life is found. This biochemical unity strongly supports the conclusion that all life on Earth shares a common ancestor. It also hints that life does not rely on an infinite number of possible chemistries. There may be many ways to build a living system, but on Earth, a single chemical framework proved especially successful. Of course, life as chemistry does not explain everything about living organisms. Chemistry alone cannot explain consciousness, emotions, or meaning. Those belong to higher levels of organization. But chemistry explains why life can persist, why it can adapt, and why it can maintain its structure against the forces of decay. It explains how you are able to heal after injury, how your cells can keep dividing, and how a fertilized egg can grow into a complex organism. When you think about life in this way, it becomes clear that being alive means being part of a chemical dance that has been running for billions of years. The molecules in your body today were once part of other organisms, other worlds. They were shaped by starlight, weathered by oceans, and stitched into new patterns by the quiet machinery inside your cells. Every breath you take, every heartbeat, every thought is supported by the movement of atoms in structured, delicate, and endlessly repeating cycles. And in the end, this scientific understanding opens a doorway to a quieter reflection. You are a brief arrangement of molecules in a universe that is mostly silent and cold. Yet for this moment, those molecules have learned to sense, to reflect, and to wonder. You are life looking at itself. You are chemistry that became aware enough to ask what chemistry can do. And in that awareness, even for a single evening, there is something calm and deeply human. A reminder that you are part of a much older process, unfolding gently through time. Chapter 3. Life as Information, the code that remembers. If chemistry gives life its structure and energy flow gives it motion, then information gives it memory. Life, at its core, is not simply matter arranged in a particular shape. It is matter arranged in such a way that patterns can persist through time. These patterns are copied, modified, protected, and passed forward long after the specific atoms that once carried them have been replaced. To understand life as information is to understand why a human being, a tree, or a bacterium is more than the molecules that currently form it. The molecules are temporary. The information is what lasts. In biology, information is not a metaphor. It is a measurable property of the molecules that carry instructions for the structure and activity of living systems. DNA, the molecule that serves as the genetic material for almost all known life, is a physical sequence capable of encoding enormous complexity. Its 4 chemical bases store information in a linear arrangement, in much the same way that letters form words. These sequences tell a cell which proteins to build, when to build them, and how to regulate countless internal processes. The concept of information in biology emerged from the integration of genetics with the molecular discoveries of the 20th century, and it remains central to every field in modern life science, from evolutionary theory to medicine. The idea that life is an information system gains strength when we consider how faithfully biological information can be transmitted. When a cell divides, it copies its DNA with remarkable accuracy. Specialized enzymes read the sequence of the original strand and synthesize a new complementary strand. Even though this process is imperfect, the error rate is extraordinarily low because the system includes proofreading and repair mechanisms that correct mistakes. This degree of precision allows living organisms to maintain stable identities across many generations. In humans, the DNA in your cells today is a direct inheritor of the DNA carried by your ancestors, stretching back through deep time, long before humans existed as a species. Yet information in life is not static. Mutations, small, random changes in the genetic sequence, introduce variation. Some mutations have no effect, some are harmful, and some improve the organism's ability to survive or reproduce. Over long stretches of evolutionary time, these variations accumulate. Natural selection acts on them, favoring patterns that function well in particular environments. The result is that the informational content of DNA is shaped by the history of life itself. The genome of any organism is not simply a set of instructions for building a body. It is also a record, written in chemical form, of which patterns survive the challenges of countless generations. Information in living systems is also hierarchical. DNA stores instructions, but those instructions must be interpreted by cellular machinery. Ribosomes translate the genetic sequence into proteins. Regulatory networks control which genes are active or silent at any given moment. Feedback loops allow cells to respond to internal changes and external signals. This is why biologists often describe life as an information processing system. The flow of information from DNA to RNA to proteins is only part of the story. Information flows through metabolic pathways, through electrical activity in neurons, through signals exchanged by organisms in ecosystems. The entire structure of life can be seen as layers upon layers of interacting informational processes. One of the most intriguing aspects of biological information is that it is not limited to genes. Epigenetic modifications can alter how DNA is used without changing the sequence itself. Chemical markers placed on DNA or its associated proteins can turn genes on or off. These modifications can sometimes be passed to offspring, allowing information about the environment to influence future generations. This flexibility adds depth to the concept of life as information, showing that inheritance is not solely about fixed sequences, but also about dynamic regulation. There is also information stored in the structure of cells themselves. The shape of a protein determines its function. The arrangement of organelles influences how a cell behaves. Even the geometry of membranes carries information that guides processes like cell division and communication. These structural features are not encoded directly in DNA, but emerge from the interactions between molecules during development. In a sense, life remembers not only through sequences, but also through patterns of organization. When we expand our view from individual organisms to entire lineages, life begins to resemble a vast, interconnected information network. Every species on Earth carries a genetic memory of its evolutionary path. The reason humans share so much of their genome with other animals is not because the molecules themselves are ancient, but because the information they encode has proven extraordinarily successful at maintaining life across millions of years. When scientists compare DNA sequences across species, they are comparing branches of the same informational tree, each branch shaped by time, selection, and chance. This perspective is especially powerful when considering the origin of life. In its earliest stages, life may have begun as simple chemical systems capable of copying themselves. Such systems would have held only small amounts of information, perhaps encoded in short RNA molecules or other primitive polymers. Over time, as copying mechanisms improved and molecular networks became more complex, the amount of information they could store grew. The sudden appearance of highly structured genomes did not happen in a single leap. It was the result of billions of years of gradual accumulation and refinement of information. This view is supported by research in molecular evolution, which suggests that early life must have been far simpler than even the simplest modern organisms. Life as information also helps explain why living systems can be so robust. Information can be copied, repaired, and distributed. A single cell in your body contains all the genetic information needed to build the entire organism. Though most cells use only a subset of this information, the entire code is there, silently preserved. This redundancy protects life from damage. Even if many molecules degrade, as long as the information remains intact and the cell has enough energy to repair itself, life can continue. At the same time, information in biology is not indestructible. Radiation, chemicals, and natural copying errors can damage DNA. Organisms must constantly repair their genetic material to maintain fidelity. Aging itself may be partly understood as the gradual accumulation of molecular damage that cells can no longer fully repair. Life is a system that fights tirelessly to preserve information, but it can never do so perfectly. The involvement of information also extends to the highest levels of biological organization. Nervous systems, for example, are extraordinary information processing networks. In humans, the brain receives sensory inputs, integrates them, compares them with stored memories, and generates behavior. Memory itself is a form of biological information storage, arising from changes in synaptic strength and neural structure. Although neural information is very different from genetic information, both reflect the same fundamental principle. Life persists by encoding patterns, updating them, and acting upon them. In recent years, some researchers have proposed even broader interpretations of life as information. They suggest that the defining feature of living systems is their ability to maintain internal order by using information gained from the environment. In this view, life is not defined only by molecules or metabolic cycles. It is defined by systems that reduce uncertainty, predict outcomes, and act in ways that preserve themselves. This idea is not meant to replace traditional biology, but to highlight an underlying unity. Life uses information to resist disorder. Understanding life in terms of information also helps explain why living beings can learn, adapt, and anticipate. Information is not merely stored, it is used to make decisions. A bacterium that swims toward higher concentrations of nutrients is acting on information. A tree that alters its growth depending on sunlight and soil conditions is acting on information. A human being planning the future is acting on information. Each of these behaviors reflects a different level of complexity, but all rely on the same fundamental principles. When you look at yourself through the lens of information, your existence becomes both simpler and more profound. Your body is made of molecules, but your identity is made of patterns. These patterns, your genetic instructions, your memories, your learned experiences, are all forms of information stored in physical form. They are constantly being copied, revised, and preserved by the quiet work happening inside your cells. The atoms in your body are temporary visitors, arriving and departing, but the information that shapes you can endure far longer. And there is a gentle existential comfort in this idea. You are part of a lineage of information that began long before you were born and will continue long after your individual molecules have dispersed. You are a momentary expression of patterns shaped by ancient oceans, distant ancestors, and countless decisions made by life across time. The information that flows through you is older than memory and broader than thought. And as you rest tonight, you can feel the quiet continuity of that flow, a reminder that you are not separate from life's long story, but an active participant in its unfolding. Chapter 4. Life as a system open to energy. If you trace every living process down to its most fundamental requirement, you reach a simple truth. Nothing alive can persist without a continuous flow of energy. Life is not a sealed object placed against the cold background of the universe. It is an open system, exchanging energy and matter with its surroundings at every moment. This is not a philosophical description, but a deeply physical one. According to the principles of thermodynamics, all systems drift toward disorder unless energy is supplied to maintain structure. Life, by its very nature, is organized, highly structured, and far from equilibrium. To remain alive, it must constantly work against the natural tendency of physical systems to break down. Life's relationship with energy becomes clear when imagining a cell not as a static object, but as a dynamic process. Inside every living cell, countless biochemical reactions unfold in a continuous flow. These reactions require energy not only to build molecules and repair damage, but also to maintain the ion gradients, electrical potentials, and molecular structures that define the living state. Without this input, the cell's internal order collapses. Membranes lose their integrity, proteins unfold, genetic material degrades, and metabolism stops. In this sense, a living cell is like a flame, sustained by a steady supply of fuel, constantly rebuilding itself, and extinguished the moment that fuel disappears. This dependency on external energy sources is not a limitation. It is the defining condition that allows living systems to flourish. By remaining open to energy, life can grow, replicate, evolve, and diversify. Organisms do not simply receive energy, they transform it. They capture it, channel it, store it, and release it in controlled ways. The great diversity of life on Earth reflects the many strategies organisms have developed to harvest energy from the environment. Some rely on sunlight, some on chemical gradients, some on consuming other organisms. But the core principle is the same. Without energy flow, there is no life. Sunlight is the primary energy source for most life on Earth. Through the process of photosynthesis, plants, algae, and some bacteria capture solar energy and convert it into chemical energy stored in organic molecules. These molecules serve as fuel not only for the organisms that create them, but also for the countless species that consume them, either directly or indirectly. Photosynthesis also produces oxygen, a molecule that later became central to the metabolic strategies of animals and many microbes. Despite its chemical complexity, photosynthesis is essentially an elegant method for converting the energy of sunlight into a form that living systems can use, anchoring nearly the entire biosphere to a continuous influx of energy from the sun. Where sunlight does not reach, life finds other pathways. In the dark depths of the ocean, near hydrothermal vents, microbes harness chemical energy from the Earth's interior. They use inorganic compounds such as hydrogen sulfide or methane as fuel, creating ecosystems entirely independent of sunlight. These deep-sea communities demonstrate that life does not depend on a single type of energy source. Instead, it depends on access to any steady supply of usable energy. This flexibility is one reason why astrobiologists consider energy availability a key criterion for identifying potentially habitable environments beyond Earth. Energy enters living systems in many forms, but once inside, it is treated in remarkably consistent ways. At the cellular level, chemical potential energy is stored in molecules such as ATP, which acts as a universal energy currency. Cells use ATP to drive reactions that would otherwise be energetically unfavorable. When ATP is consumed, it releases energy that can be used for movement, synthesis, transport, or signaling. The production of ATP itself relies on controlled flows of electrons and protons through specialized membranes. These flows are maintained by metabolic pathways that have been conserved across the vast majority of life forms. The universality of these systems highlights a deep evolutionary connection, showing that once life found an effective way to capture and store energy, natural selection preserved that mechanism across enormous spans of time. What makes life especially remarkable is the precision with which it controls energy flow. Too little energy, and the organism cannot maintain its internal structure. Too much energy, and molecules are damaged by heat, oxidation, or radiation. Every living system must strike a delicate balance. This balance is achieved through intricate regulatory networks that sense conditions inside and outside the cell and adjust metabolism accordingly. A cell can accelerate energy production when fuel is abundant, or slow its processes when resources become scarce. Organisms can enter dormant states, conserve energy, or shift to alternative metabolic pathways in times of stress. These adaptations show that life is not merely a passive recipient of energy, but an active participant in regulating how energy moves through its systems. Energy flow also drives biological growth and reproduction. When an organism grows, it increases its internal complexity. Building that complexity requires energy. When cells divide, they must replicate their DNA, construct new membranes, and assemble proteins, all processes that demand a substantial energy investment. Reproduction, whether sexual or asexual, involves the transmission of information encoded in DNA. But the copying, packaging, and distributing of that information is fundamentally an energetic task. Life does not simply pass information forward. It invests energy into ensuring that information is carried accurately and is supported by the structural and biochemical machinery needed for survival. At larger scales, energy flow becomes the foundation of entire ecosystems. Primary producers capture energy and make it available to consumers. Predators rely on the energy stored in prey, and decomposers break down organic matter to release energy and nutrients back into the environment. In an ecological sense, life can be seen as a vast web of energy exchanges, moving from organism to organism in ways shaped by competition, cooperation, and evolution. The structure of these energy flows determines the stability, diversity, and complexity of ecosystems. When energy inputs change, ecosystems shift. When energy inputs disappear entirely, ecosystems collapse. Understanding life as a system open to energy also clarifies why every living organism eventually dies. Even the most efficient biological systems accumulate damage over time. Some damage results from reactive molecules produced during metabolism. Some arises from environmental stress, ultraviolet radiation, or chemical exposure. Cells can repair much of this damage, but not all of it. Over time, the inefficiencies compound, and the organism can no longer maintain the delicate chemical and energetic balance required to stay alive. Death is not a failure of biology, but a consequence of the physical laws that govern energy, entropy, and order. Life persists only through continuous renewal, and at the scale of populations, That renewal takes the form of reproduction across generations. Life's dependence on energy flow has implications beyond biology. In physics, an open system is one that exchanges energy or matter with its surroundings. Living organisms fit this definition perfectly. They take in nutrients and convert them into energy-rich molecules, release waste products, and maintain conditions inside their cells that differ markedly from their external environment. To achieve this, they must expend energy. This requirement creates a fundamental asymmetry between living and non-living systems. Non-living systems drift toward equilibrium. Living systems resist equilibrium by constantly taking in energy and exporting entropy. In simple terms, life creates pockets of order at the cost of increased disorder elsewhere. This does not violate the laws of physics. It operates within them, using energy to temporarily resist the universal drift toward simplicity. Because of this, some scientists describe living systems as dissipative structures. These are physical systems that maintain their internal organization by dissipating energy. Examples include hurricanes, convection cells, and certain chemical oscillations. While these examples are not alive, they help illustrate the principle that structured, dynamic systems can emerge when energy flows through matter. What distinguishes living dissipative structures from non-living ones is the presence of information and replication. Life uses energy not only to maintain structure, but also to preserve and transmit patterns across generations. Still, the analogy shows that life is deeply connected to the physics of energy flow, not isolated from it. When thinking about energy in the context of life, it is tempting to imagine energy as something external that life merely consumes. But life and energy are intertwined at a deeper level. Without energy flow, there can be no metabolism, no growth, no adaptation, no evolution, and no awareness. Energy is not an accessory to life. It is the foundation that makes biological complexity possible. Every breath you take is an energy transaction. Every thought is supported by electrical activity powered by chemical gradients. Every movement, healing process, memory, or emotion is grounded in energetic processes happening quietly within your cells. And when you step back and consider your own existence from this perspective, something gentle and meaningful emerges. You are not separate from the energy that sustains you. You are a temporary arrangement of atoms held together by continuous flows of energy that began long before you were born and will continue long after you are gone. The warmth in your body, the rhythm of your heartbeat, the electrical whisper of your thoughts, all of these are expressions of energy passing through the intricate structure that you call yourself. You are not a static object, but a momentary pattern in the great movement of energy through the universe. As you rest tonight, you can feel this quiet truth. Life does not cling to stillness, it exists because of flow. And you too are part of that flow, here for a while, luminous with borrowed energy, shaped by it, sustained by it, and eventually released back into the wider world. Chapter 5. Life as a boundary, the membrane between in here and out there. If life is to exist at all, it must draw a line. It must make a distinction between what belongs to itself and what belongs to the surrounding world. This may seem like a simple idea, but it is one of the most profound principles in biology. Without a boundary, there can be no organism, no metabolism, no information storage, no evolution, and no sense of identity. Life emerges when matter organizes itself into a structure that can maintain an internal environment different from its surroundings. The most fundamental version of this structure is the membrane. A membrane is not just a physical barrier. It is a selective, dynamic interface that allows a living system to preserve order while interacting with the environment. This dual role, protecting what lies within while remaining open to exchange, is essential. If a boundary were completely sealed, the organism would starve and suffocate in isolation. If it were completely open, the organism would dissolve into the surrounding chaos. Life continues only through the delicate art of separating without disconnecting. At the level of biochemistry, cell membranes are composed primarily of lipid molecules arranged in a bilayer. These lipids have hydrophilic heads that seek water and hydrophobic tails that avoid it. When placed in water, they spontaneously organize into sheets or spheres, with their tails tucked safely inside. This behavior arises from the properties of water and the physical structure of the lipids themselves. It is one of the earliest and most important examples of self-assembly in biology. Long before complex life evolved, the basic physics of lipid molecules likely created primitive compartments capable of holding together simple chemical reactions. Once formed, these early membranes would have offered a crucial advantage. By enclosing certain molecules, they created a microenvironment in which reactions could occur more efficiently and consistently. Concentration gradients could arise, catalysts could accumulate, beneficial chemical sequences could persist long enough to copy themselves. Over time, natural selection would have favored compartments that were stable, flexible, and able to grow and divide. In this way, the membrane became the first defining structure of life on Earth. Modern cell membranes are far more complex than their ancient ancestors. They contain not only lipids, but also proteins, carbohydrates, and cholesterol-like molecules that regulate fluidity and stability. Embedded proteins act as gatekeepers, controlling the movement of ions, nutrients, and signals across the membrane. Some proteins serve as pumps, using energy to transport molecules against concentration gradients. Others function as channels that open or close in response to electrical or chemical cues. Still others act as receptors, detecting signals from the outside world and initiating changes inside the cell. The membrane is not a wall. It is a living interface, densely populated with molecular machines that allow life to sense, respond, and adapt. Because membranes are selective, they maintain different conditions inside the cell than outside. This difference is critical for almost all biological processes. Cells keep certain ions at higher concentrations inside, creating electrical potentials that power everything from nutrient transport to neural signaling. They maintain specific pH levels, regulate water balance, and manage the internal concentrations of countless molecules. These controlled differences are the foundation of metabolism, growth, and communication. Without them, the intricate chemistry of life would collapse into the uniformity of the environment. The membrane also gives shape to life. It defines the boundaries of cells, which are the basic units of all living organisms. Even in the most complex multicellular beings, each individual cell maintains its own membrane, preserving an internal world within the larger organism. This nested structure, cells within tissues, tissues within organs, organs within bodies, exists only because membranes create distinct boundaries at every level. In multicellular organisms, membranes do more than separate one cell from another. They form communication networks. Cells use membrane-bound proteins to send and receive signals, passing information throughout the body. Hormones, neurotransmitters, immune markers, and countless other messengers rely on membrane interactions. Without these interactions, coordination among cells would be impossible. The heart could not beat rhythmically, the brain could not process thoughts, and the immune system could not distinguish between self and non-self. This last distinction, self versus non-self, is one of the most remarkable consequences of biological boundaries. The immune system, for example, uses molecular signatures displayed on cell membranes to identify which cells belong to the organism and which are invaders. These signatures act like identification badges. When a foreign cell or virus enters the body without the correct surface markers, the immune system recognizes it as out there and mounts a defense. In this way, boundaries do not merely separate the organism from the environment. They define identity at the molecular level. Membranes also exist inside cells. The eukaryotic cell, which makes up plants, animals, fungi, and many microorganisms, contains internal compartments called organelles. Each organelle is enclosed by its own membrane, creating specialized environments for different tasks. Mitochondria generate energy. The endoplasmic reticulum folds proteins. The Golgi apparatus sorts and modifies them. Lysosomes break down waste. These miniature boundaries allow the cell to partition tasks, improving efficiency and enabling greater complexity. Life multiplies order by adding boundaries within boundaries, each with its own function. Energy flow, discussed earlier, depends on membranes in essential ways. In many organisms, the capture, conversion, and storage of energy require tightly controlled gradients across membranes. The production of ATP in mitochondria depends on differences in proton concentration inside and outside the mitochondrial membrane. Photosynthesis, too, relies on membranes inside chloroplasts to create electrochemical gradients powered by sunlight. This connection between energy and boundaries is not coincidental. Membranes make it possible to separate charges, maintain unequal concentrations, and harness the resulting potential energy for biological work. Without boundaries, energy could not be controlled or used efficiently. Information also relies on boundaries. DNA, housed within the nucleus in eukaryotic cells, is protected by a specialized membrane that regulates which molecules enter or leave. This selective barrier ensures that genetic material is shielded from damage while remaining accessible to the molecular machinery that reads and copies it. Even gene expression depends on controlled movement across boundaries. RNA must leave the nucleus to be translated, while regulatory proteins must enter to influence genetic activity. The regulation of these movements shapes how cells develop, respond to stress, and maintain identity. When we consider the origin of life, boundaries play an indispensable role. Experiments in prebiotic chemistry have shown that simple lipid molecules can spontaneously form vesicles under early Earth conditions. These vesicles can grow by absorbing additional lipids, divide when agitated, and encapsulate genetic-like polymers. Some studies suggest that such protocells could have formed naturally in ancient environments, providing a protected space for the first self-replicating molecules to evolve. While many details remain uncertain, the broader scientific insight is clear. Boundaries are necessary for life to sustain itself long enough to change and adapt. Even at the ecological level, boundaries influence life. Organisms create ecological niches, distinct environments shaped by behaviors and interactions. A forest canopy, a coral reef, or a microbial mat, is defined partly by the invisible boundaries of temperature, light, nutrients, and community structure. Life generates its own boundaries through growth and activity, and these boundaries in turn shape the evolution of species. In this way, the concept of in here and out there expands beyond the cell and the organism to encompass entire ecosystems. There is, however, a deeper philosophical implication behind all this biological detail. Boundaries make life possible, but they also create individuality. Inside the membrane lies the internal world that the organism maintains and defends. Outside lies everything else. This separation is necessary for survival, yet it also gives rise to vulnerability. Because life depends on maintaining its boundaries, anything that disrupts them, toxins, physical damage, pathogens, can threaten the organism. Life is resilient but fragile, energetic but constrained. And yet, from the perspective of nature, boundaries are temporary. Cells divide and pass their membranes to daughter cells. Organisms live and die, returning their materials to the environment. Species emerge and vanish, leaving open niches behind them. Nothing with boundaries lasts forever, but everything with boundaries participates in the ongoing continuity of life. In a quiet moment, you might reflect on this truth. You too are defined by boundaries. Your skin, your cells, your thoughts. These boundaries give you shape, identity, and awareness. They create the sense of in here that makes experience possible. But beyond your boundaries lies a world that shaped you and a universe that continues without end. Life is a brief flicker of order held together by delicate membranes, and yet, within those boundaries, an entire inner world unfolds, complex, conscious, and capable of wondering about its place in the vastness of everything out there. Chapter 6: Life as Evolution, Nature's Endless Experiment. To understand life in its full depth, you must understand evolution. Not as a historical event or as a distant biological principle, but as the continuous engine that shapes every living system on Earth. Evolution is not something that happened long ago. It is happening right now, within every lineage, every population, and every interaction between organisms and their environments. It operates silently, without intention, but with astonishing creativity. When seen clearly, evolution reveals life as an ongoing experiment, one in which countless variations arise, few persist, and those that do leave their marks in the genomes of future generations. In scientific terms, evolution describes the change in heritable characteristics across generations. These changes arise because the information stored in DNA is copied imperfectly, producing variation. When different variants influence survival or reproduction even slightly, the environment shapes which ones continue forward. This process does not follow a plan. It is the cumulative result of natural selection, genetic drift, mutation, recombination, and the interactions among organisms themselves. The outcome is the incredible diversity of life we see today. From microbes thriving in boiling springs to birds migrating across continents and humans building entire civilizations. The power of evolution comes from a simple but profound concept: variation. No two organisms are exactly alike, even within the same species. The shuffling of genes during reproduction, combined with mutation, ensures that every new generation is slightly different from the one before. These small differences matter because environments are never constant. Temperatures shift, predators evolve, food sources fluctuate, and ecosystems change. When living systems encounter these pressures, certain variations allow some organisms to survive more successfully than others. Over many generations, these advantageous traits accumulate. The population changes not by sudden leaps, but by a steady reshaping of the genetic landscape. Evolution also explains why certain features appear repeatedly in unrelated lineages. Wings evolved in insects, birds, and bats, completely independently, because flight opened new ecological opportunities. Eyes evolved multiple times because sensing light enhances survival in many environments. Similar forms emerge not because organisms share a recent ancestor, but because natural selection discovers similar solutions to similar challenges. This phenomenon, known scientifically as convergent evolution, illustrates that life explores the same functional possibilities again and again, though the underlying genetic pathways may differ each time. The fossil record provides a long-view perspective of evolution in action. Layer by layer, it reveals a history not of steady progress, but of branching experimentation. Species appear, flourish, diversify, and disappear. Entire groups of organisms rise to dominance and later fade. Extinctions open ecological space, and new lineages fill it. This pattern reflects the fact that evolution has no predetermined direction. Life adapts to whatever conditions exist at any moment. If those conditions change drastically, evolution shifts course. This is why the Earth's biosphere has transformed repeatedly, from oceans filled with simple cells to eras dominated by giant reptiles to the mammalian world we know today. Molecular biology strengthens this picture by revealing the deep unity underlying diversity. When scientists compare DNA sequences across species, they find shared genetic signatures linking all life to common ancestors. The more distant the relationship, the more differences accumulate. These molecular clocks allow researchers to estimate when lineages diverged and how evolutionary pathways unfolded. They also highlight the surprising extent to which organisms share fundamental biological machinery. Humans, mice, fish, and even plants rely on many of the same genes to perform essential functions. Evolution does not reinvent every component. It modifies existing ones, repurposes old structures, or duplicates genes and lets new versions diverge. Another essential aspect of evolution is genetic drift. While natural selection is often emphasized, drift plays a major role, especially in small populations. Drift refers to random changes in gene frequencies that occur simply by chance. A particular variant may become more common, not because it is better, but because it happened to be inherited by individuals who survived for unrelated reasons. Over long stretches of time, drift can significantly alter the genetic composition of a population. Natural selection and drift interact continuously, shaping evolution through both adaptive and neutral processes. Environmental pressures drive evolution in ways that are sometimes subtle and sometimes dramatic. Organisms face challenges from climate, food availability, disease, competition, and the physical structure of their habitats. They also face challenges from one another. Predator and prey co-evolve, each shaping the other's abilities. Plants and pollinators develop mutual adaptations. Parasites and hosts engage in evolutionary arms races that can continue for millions of years. These interactions reveal that evolution is not just about solitary organisms adapting to passive surroundings. It is about dynamic relationships, life reacting to life. Humans provide a striking example of the complexity of evolutionary pressures. Our species evolved in the shifting environments of ancient Africa, shaped by changes in climate, food sources, predator threats, and social structures. Features like endurance running, tool use, language, and complex cooperation arose gradually through countless small steps. Even now, evolution continues in our species. Our immune systems adapt to pathogens. Our bodies respond to dietary shifts. Populations develop genetic resistance to diseases or environmental toxins. Evolution did not end when humans appeared. We are part of it, shaped by it, and still participating in it. One of the most fascinating consequences of evolution is the emergence of complex systems. No simple organism begins with the intention of forming tissues, organs, or societies. These structures emerge when small adaptive changes accumulate and interact. For example, multicellularity arose multiple times independently. Early multicellular organisms were simple clusters of cells, but over long periods, division of labor and communication between cells led to specialized tissues like nerves and muscles. Eventually, these systems gave rise to creatures capable of movement, sensation, learning, and thought. What began as straightforward evolutionary changes in cell behavior produced the astonishing complexity of modern life. This pattern continues at higher levels. Social behavior evolves when organisms benefit from cooperation. Insects like bees and ants developed eusocial societies in which individuals specialize in roles. Primates, including humans, evolved complex communication, empathy, and cultural learning. None of these abilities began as grand evolutionary goals. They emerged through incremental changes that proved advantageous in specific contexts. Evolution has no foresight, yet the accumulation of its small adjustments has produced minds capable of contemplating their own origins. Evolution also provides a scientific framework for understanding fragility and resilience. Traits that evolve under one set of conditions can become liabilities when conditions change. A highly specialized organism may be efficient in one environment, but vulnerable if that environment disappears. Conversely, species with broad tolerances or flexible behaviors may survive dramatic shifts. This principle explains both the vulnerability of certain species today and the persistent adaptability of others. It also highlights a key truth. Evolution is not progress toward perfection. It is adaptation to the moment. Life's history includes periods of remarkable stability and sudden upheaval. Mass extinctions reshaped Earth's ecosystem several times, eliminating dominant groups and creating space for new ones. After each crisis, evolution accelerated, exploring new pathways. These events show that evolution is not a smooth, continuous curve, but a series of branching, reshaping, and renewal. Life persists not because it is invulnerable, but because evolution provides endless opportunities for variation and experimentation. One of the deeper scientific insights from evolution is that every living organism is both an endpoint and a beginning. You are the result of countless successful adaptations, inherited through an unbroken chain stretching back to early life in ancient seas. But you also carry genetic variants that may influence future generations. You are, in a literal sense, a temporary expression of evolution's ongoing experiment. Your ancestors shaped you, and you, in turn, contribute to the shaping of those who will follow. When you reflect on evolution in this way, an existential dimension appears. Evolution is indifferent to our desires, yet it produced beings capable of love, creativity, curiosity, and self-understanding. It produced minds able to imagine futures and contemplate meaning. Through countless small changes across countless lifetimes, nature created the possibility of awareness. You are part of that long unfolding, one expression within an ancient process that never stops exploring what life can become. And when you lie quietly at the end of the day, you can feel the continuity of that process. Every breath you take, every memory you hold, every connection you form reflects a lineage shaped by time, chance, and adaptation. You are not separate from the story of life. You are one of its living chapters, carried gently forward by the same forces that formed the first cells and the first beings who wondered. Evolution has no destination, but for this moment, it has led to you. Chapter 7. Life as Emergence, when many become one. If you look closely at life, something extraordinary reveals itself. The living world is filled with patterns, forms, and behaviors that cannot be explained simply by examining the parts alone. A single neuron cannot think, yet a network of neurons can produce consciousness. A solitary ant behaves simply, yet an entire colony can solve complex problems, allocate resources, and build intricate structures. A protein molecule has no goal, yet thousands of proteins interacting inside a cell create cycles, feedback loops, and responses that maintain life. This phenomenon, where new properties arise from the interaction of simpler components, is known as emergence. In many ways, emergence is the quiet architect of life's complexity. Emergence refers to the appearance of collective behaviors or properties that cannot be predicted from the characteristics of individual parts. These new properties arise when components interact in certain ways, forming patterns that belong not to the parts, but to the system as a whole. In physical sciences, emergence appears in examples like fluid turbulence or the crystallization of minerals. In life sciences, emergence is more profound. Life itself is an emergent property. No single molecule inside an organism is alive, but when many molecules interact in structured, dynamic systems, the living state appears and sustains itself. The idea becomes even clearer when considering the behavior of cells. A cell is composed of thousands of different molecules. Lipids forming membranes, enzymes catalyzing reactions, nucleic acids carrying information, and structural proteins forming scaffolding. None of these molecules independently possesses the qualities we call life. Yet when organized into networks of metabolism, replication, and regulation, the system behaves as though it has goals and responses. It repairs damage, maintains gradients, interprets signals, and divides. These activities are not imposed from outside. They arise from the interactions within the system. The cell is not alive because of any one component. It is alive because its components form a system that is more than the sum of their parts. Emergence becomes even more striking in multicellular organisms. A human body begins as a single fertilized cell, which divides, differentiates, and organizes itself into tissues and organs. Each cell behaves according to local instructions, chemical gradients, mechanical forces, gene expression patterns. Yet from these local interactions emerge structures like hearts, lungs, and brains. The development of these organs is not centrally orchestrated by a single controlling molecule. Instead, it arises from self-organizing processes guided by genetic information, but shaped by feedback along the way. The body does not assemble itself like a machine built piece by piece. It grows through emergent interactions. The nervous system illustrates emergence with particular clarity. Neurons communicate using electrical impulses and chemical signals, responding to inputs and sending outputs. A single neuron cannot remember, plan, or feel. Yet when billions of neurons connect in vast networks, patterns of activity emerge that correspond to perception, memory, emotion, and thought. Consciousness itself, your awareness, your sense of self, your inner world, appears to be an emergent property arising from the coordinated activity of neural networks. This does not diminish its significance. Instead, it reveals how deeply emergence shapes life at all levels. Emergence is not restricted to organisms. It also appears in ecological systems. A forest is not simply a collection of trees. It is a network of relationships among plants, animals, fungi, microbes, water, and soil. A coral reef is not just individual organisms. It is a dynamic, self-organizing community shaped by energy flow, competition, cooperation, and adaptation. These systems exhibit resilience, cycles, and behaviors that belong to the ecosystem as a whole. When one part changes, climate, nutrients, or species composition, the entire system may reorganize. The web of interactions produces new properties like stability or collapse that no single organism controls. Even evolution displays emergent qualities. Variation, selection, and inheritance operate at the level of populations, not individuals. Over long periods, these simple processes give rise to complex adaptations: wings, eyes, metabolism, and intelligence. These features are not designed in advance. They emerge gradually as small changes accumulate and interact with environmental pressures. Evolution does not aim toward complexity, but complexity can arise naturally as new opportunities appear. The emergence of new species, new ecosystems, and new behaviors reflects the interplay of countless historical events, many of them contingent and unpredictable. One way to understand emergence scientifically is through the study of complex systems. These systems share certain characteristics: many interacting components, feedback loops, nonlinear behaviors, and sensitivity to initial conditions. Life fits this description perfectly at every scale. A metabolic pathway is a complex system of enzymes and substrates. A cell is a complex system of organelles and chemical gradients. An organism is a complex system of cells, tissues, and signals. An ecosystem is a complex system of interacting species. In each case, patterns arise not because any part is in control, but because interactions produce stable or evolving forms. Another perspective comes from physics and chemistry. When molecules form networks, they exhibit behaviors that cannot be predicted solely by studying isolated molecules. For example, protein folding is an emergent process driven by interactions among amino acids and the surrounding environment. The final shape of a protein is not explicitly encoded by any one part. It emerges from the collective forces at play. Similarly, gene regulation often involves multiple factors influencing each other. A gene may be turned on or off not by a single signal, but by the combined activity of regulatory proteins, chromatin structure, and environmental cues. These processes show that emergence is more than a philosophical idea. It is a fundamental property of dynamic systems governed by physical law. One of the most interesting emergent phenomena in biology is cooperation. Cooperative behaviors arise when individuals act in ways that benefit the group, even if they appear costly to the individual. In social insects, cooperation creates entire societies with division of labor and coordinated activity. In humans, cooperation enables language, culture, technology, and shared meaning. Cooperation emerges from repeated interactions, shared signals, and mutual influence. It is not forced. It arises naturally when the benefits of shared effort outweigh the costs. The emergence of cooperation shows that evolution does not only favor competition. Under the right conditions, it favors systems that behave collectively, creating new levels of biological organization. Emergence also shapes life's ability to adapt. Organisms respond to stress through networks of genes and proteins that interact to restore balance. These responses are not dictated by single genes acting alone. They emerge from the complex interplay of signaling pathways. Similarly, behavioral adaptations in animals emerge from the interaction of sensory input, memory, and social cues. Even human culture, knowledge, language, art, and technology is an emergent property of shared minds interacting across generations. These examples show that emergence is a bridge between biology and the human experience. While emergence explains complexity, it also highlights the limits of reductionism. Studying the parts of a system is essential for understanding how it works, but many properties of life cannot be predicted simply by knowing the parts. The whole behaves differently. This does not violate physical laws. Rather, it reflects how those laws operate in systems with many interacting components. A deeper appreciation of emergence helps explain why life can be so intricate and unpredictable, yet still grounded in the same physics that governs stars, oceans, and stones. Emergence also suggests that life may not be unique to Earth. If life is what happens when matter reaches a certain level of organized complexity, driven by energy flow and information storage, then similar emergent processes could arise elsewhere. Whether alien life resembles Earth life or takes entirely different forms, the underlying principle may be the same. Complex interactions give rise to new behaviors not found in the individual components. In this sense, emergence offers a universal framework for thinking about what life could be. As you reflect on emergence, a gentle insight begins to take shape. You too are an emergent being. Your thoughts arise from neural patterns. Your identity emerges from memories, emotions, and relationships. Your life is not located in any single molecule or moment, but in the patterns formed by countless interactions happening quietly inside you and around you. You are a collection of parts, but you are also something more. A unified experience, a coherent self, a consciousness capable of imagining futures and remembering pasts. Emergence reminds you that complexity can arise from simplicity and meaning can arise from matter. You are not separate from the processes that shape the universe. You are one of their expressions, woven from interactions so intricate and subtle that they give rise to awareness. And as you rest, you can feel the deep truth behind emergence, that your existence is a harmony of countless small events, each insignificant alone, but together creating a life that is uniquely yours. Chapter 8. Life as Awareness, the Strange Gift of the Brain. Among all the emergent properties of life, awareness stands apart. It is the quiet glow of experience behind your eyes, the sense of being present, the ability to feel, perceive, and know. Awareness is not necessary for life to exist. Countless organisms survive and reproduce without anything resembling consciousness. And yet, in some lineages, particularly in animals with complex nervous systems, awareness emerges like a new dimension of being. It transforms life from a simple response to stimuli into a rich inner world of perceptions, memories, emotions, and choices. In many ways, awareness is evolution's most astonishing creation. From a scientific standpoint, awareness is often described as the product of a brain that processes information in a highly integrated and dynamic way. Neurons communicate through electrical impulses and chemical signals, forming networks capable of representing sensory inputs, maintaining internal states, and generating coordinated behaviors. Awareness arises not from a single structure or mechanism, but from the combined activity of widespread neural circuits that interact continuously. Neuroscientists do not yet have a complete explanation for consciousness, but they understand many of the underlying processes that make it possible. At its foundation, awareness requires the ability to detect and interpret sensory information. Even simple organisms respond to light, chemicals, pressure, or temperature. But in complex animals, these sensory systems feed into centralized neural structures that integrate information across multiple modalities. The brain constructs a unified representation of the world, combining signals from the eyes, ears, skin, muscles, and internal organs. This integration is one of the hallmarks of awareness. It allows an organism to understand its environment, not as fragmented data, but as a coherent experience. The brain also generates an internal model of the body. This model includes proprioception, the sense of where your limbs are relative to one another, as well as interoception, the sense of internal bodily states such as hunger, heartbeat, and breathing. The integration of external perception and internal sensation creates what neuroscientists often call a self-model. A self-model is not the same as self-awareness, but it lays the groundwork by providing a reference point, the boundary between in here and out there. The brain must maintain this distinction to coordinate movement, predict outcomes, and ensure survival. Without it, an organism would have no stable reference for action. Attention plays an essential role in awareness. The brain receives far more sensory information than it can process consciously, so it constantly filters and prioritizes signals. Attention directs neural resources towards certain stimuli while suppressing others. This selective amplification shapes what enters awareness and what remains unconscious. Research shows that attention is not a single process, but a collection of mechanisms distributed throughout the brain. It can be guided by goals, expectations, or sudden changes in the environment. Through attention, awareness becomes flexible, capable of shifting focus and responding adaptively. Memory adds depth to awareness by allowing past experiences to influence current perception. Humans, like many animals, form short-term memories, long-term memories, and emotional associations that shape behavior. These memories are stored through changes in synaptic strength and neural connectivity. When activated, they re-enter the stream of awareness as recollections, expectations, or learned patterns of interpretation. Memory allows the brain to build a narrative, linking moments across time. Without memory, awareness would be fleeting and fragmentary, unable to build a coherent sense of continuity. Language adds yet another layer of complexity, though it is unique to humans. Language allows symbolic thought, representing ideas not tied directly to immediate sensory experiences. With language, awareness gains the ability to classify, describe, and reflect upon itself. Concepts like identity, future, purpose, and meaning become possible because the brain can manipulate symbols that refer to abstract ideas. Through language, humans can share their inner experiences with others, shaping collective culture, knowledge, and understanding. Language transforms awareness from a personal phenomenon into a shared one, allowing civilizations to grow and evolve. Yet awareness is not limited to human language or human-level cognition. Studies in cognitive ethology and comparative neuroscience show that many animals experience forms of awareness. Mammals and birds demonstrate problem-solving, empathy, planning, and social understanding. Some cephalopods, such as octopuses, show remarkable intelligence, exploring and manipulating their environment with curiosity. These observations suggest that awareness can evolve along multiple pathways shaped by ecological demands and neural architecture. It is not a single phenomenon, but a spectrum of capacities that emerge when nervous systems become sufficiently complex. Scientists studying the evolution of awareness propose that it likely arose because it provided adaptive advantages. An organism capable of planning, predicting, and understanding the actions of others would be better equipped to survive and reproduce. Awareness allows animals to learn quickly from experience, navigate complex social environments, and adapt to unpredictable conditions. It enhances behavioral flexibility, a trait that becomes increasingly important in dynamic ecosystems. While evolution does not aim for awareness, it favors traits that improve survival, and awareness is one of the profound outcomes of that process. Neuroscientists have proposed several theories to explain how awareness emerges from brain activity. Although these theories differ in their details, they share a common theme. Consciousness arises from patterns of information processing that are integrated, recursive, and dynamic. One influential idea suggests that awareness emerges when information is widely shared across neural networks, allowing the brain to unify diverse signals into a coherent whole. Another idea emphasizes the role of recurrent loops, circuits in which neural activity feeds back upon itself, enabling sustained representation. While these theories remain under investigation, they provide valuable frameworks for understanding the physical basis of awareness. Despite advances in neuroscience, much about consciousness remains mysterious. Scientists can measure neural activity, map circuits, and observe correlations between brain states and experiences. Yet the subjective quality of awareness, the feeling of being, remains difficult to explain fully. This challenge is sometimes referred to as the hard problem of consciousness. It points to a gap between objective measurements and subjective experience. Some researchers argue that understanding this subjective side requires new scientific tools or conceptual frameworks. Others believe that the mystery will diminish as our understanding of brain function deepens. Whatever the future holds, the scientific study of awareness continues to advance rapidly, revealing new insights each year. A striking aspect of awareness is its fragility. Changes in brain chemistry, injury, illness, or external substances can alter perception, memory, emotion, and identity. Awareness can fade during sleep and return upon waking. It can expand during moments of intense focus or contract during emotional distress. These variations demonstrate that awareness is not a fixed entity, but a dynamic process that depends on the brain's physiological state. In this sense, awareness resembles a flame, a pattern sustained by underlying physical conditions, flickering and changing in response to internal and external influences. Awareness also plays a central role in what humans call meaning. Through awareness, you experience emotions, relationships, goals, and reflections. You evaluate the past, imagine the future, and form beliefs about who you are. While other biological processes sustain your physical existence, awareness shapes the quality of your inner life. It connects the biological and the existential. The brain's ability to generate an inner world allows you to ask questions about purpose, identity, and the nature of reality. Questions that no purely biochemical process can answer, yet arise naturally from the same biological system. When awareness is viewed through the lens of biology, it becomes clear that it is neither magical nor mysterious in the supernatural sense. It is an emergent property of physical processes, electrochemical signals, information flow, and neural interactions. But understanding that it is natural does not make it any less remarkable. Awareness is rare in the vast expanse of the universe. Stars do not ponder their existence. Mountains do not reflect on the passage of time. Yet the brain, composed of atoms forged in long-dead stars, somehow creates a space in which experience occurs. Through awareness, the universe looks back at itself. And now, as you rest at the end of the day, you can feel the gentle continuity of this process within you. Awareness is not something you must force or hold. It arises naturally when the brain is awake and softens when the mind grows quiet. You are a temporary constellation of thoughts and sensations, woven together by the activity of billions of cells working in harmony. You are the brief awareness of a universe that is mostly silent. And as you drift towards sleep, you can let that awareness settle like dust in warm light, a reminder that you are part of something vast, ancient, and endlessly unfolding. Chapter 9. Life Beyond Earth. Could biology look nothing like ours? When we imagine life on other worlds, our minds often reach for familiar shapes. We picture creatures with limbs, eyes, or recognizable behaviors. But these images reflect our own biology, our own history, and our own narrow experience of what life can be. In truth, the forms that life might take beyond Earth could be wildly different. Our planet provides a single example of biology shaped by a specific sequence of environmental conditions, chemical opportunities, and evolutionary pathways. To understand life in a cosmic context, we must separate the essence of life from the particular implementation we see on Earth. The question becomes not whether alien life would look like us, but what constraints the universe imposes on living systems and where creativity may emerge beyond those constraints. From a scientific perspective, life can be described through a few universal principles: the ability to maintain internal order, process energy, store and use information, and evolve through variation and selection. These principles arise from physics and chemistry, not from Earth's specific biochemistry. If these principles are fundamental, then life elsewhere could operate on different molecular platforms while still following the same underlying logic. Carbon-based life, water-based chemistry, and DNA-based information systems are examples from Earth, but they are not necessarily universal. The cosmos may hold alternative chemistries, alternative solvents, and alternative pathways for building complexity. Consider carbon, often called the backbone of life on Earth. Carbon's ability to form stable, complex molecules under a wide range of temperatures and pressures makes it uniquely suited for life. Many scientists believe that carbon is likely to be a key element in extraterrestrial biology because of its versatility. But carbon is not the only possible foundation. Silicon, though less flexible, can form long chains and complex structures under certain conditions. Speculative frameworks imagine silicon-based life in environments vastly different from Earth's, perhaps on worlds with high temperatures or unusual atmospheric compositions. Whether such life is chemically plausible remains debated, but the broader principle is clear. Alternative chemistries cannot be ruled out. Water, too, might be more contingent than universal. Water is a remarkable solvent, enabling molecules to dissolve, interact, move, and self-organize. Its temperature range, density behavior, and hydrogen bonding properties create conditions favorable for complex chemistry. Yet other solvents could, in principle, support life. Liquid methane or ethane found on Saturn's moon Titan provide environments with very different physical properties. Life in such solvents would metabolize more slowly, use different molecular interactions, and operate under constraints we can barely imagine. Ammonia, sulfuric acid, and supercritical carbon dioxide are other candidates that scientists explore when considering exotic biochemistries. In these environments, biological processes might emerge using entirely different reaction dynamics. Even the concept of cells, membrane-bound compartments, could be different elsewhere. On Earth, the lipid bilayer membrane is essential for maintaining internal chemical gradients. But in non-water solvents, different membrane architectures could evolve. Some researchers hypothesize that in methane-based environments, biological compartments could form from molecules that behave very differently from lipids. They might create structures that remain flexible at extremely low temperatures, or allow for chemical exchanges unlike anything found in terrestrial biology. Information storage, so central to life on Earth, might also follow different rules. DNA and RNA are efficient information carriers, but they are not the only molecules capable of encoding information. Alternative polymers with different backbones, different bases, or entirely different physical structures could exist. Even non-polymer systems, mineral-based templates, interacting crystalline surfaces, or networks of self-regulating molecules could serve as information processing architectures. Life may not require a double helix. It requires a way to store patterns, replicate them, and introduce variation. One of the most compelling possibilities is that life beyond Earth might exist in conditions far more extreme than those most organisms on Earth can tolerate. Our own planet already hosts extremophiles, organisms that thrive in boiling water, acidic pools, high radiation, deep pressure, or frozen environments. These examples expand our understanding of where life can exist. They also suggest that life on other worlds may be adapted to conditions we view as hostile. On icy moons like Europa or Enceladus, life might dwell in subsurface oceans kept warm by tidal heating. On Mars, life could survive underground, shielded from radiation and nourished by chemical reactions in the rock. On exoplanets orbiting distant stars, life might develop under red suns, in superheated atmospheres, or beneath thick clouds. Liquid water may not be the only environment where life can emerge, but it remains a prime candidate due to its abundance and chemical properties. When astronomers search for habitable worlds, they often focus on the habitable zone around stars, the region where temperatures allow liquid water to exist on a planet's surface. Yet this definition is increasingly recognized as narrow. Many worlds could harbor subsurface oceans, regardless of their position relative to their star. Some planets might possess internal heating mechanisms, allowing life to thrive without sunlight. Others could experience cycles of freezing and thawing that drive unique chemical pathways. Even more exotic possibilities stretch the imagination. Some theoretical models suggest the potential for plasma-based life in the atmospheres of gas giants, where electrical activity and turbulence could produce stable structures capable of storing and processing information. Other researchers explore the idea of life composed not of molecules, but of interacting physical fields, though such concepts remain deeply speculative. What matters scientifically is that complexity, feedback, and organization can arise in many contexts, given the right ingredients and the right flows of energy. Another question concerns the evolutionary pathways that extraterrestrial life might follow. Evolution is a universal consequence of variation, inheritance, and selection, but the outcomes depend on environmental conditions. Alien life might not resemble Earth life in any familiar way. There is no guarantee of bilateral symmetry, limbs, or sensory organs. Life in a low-light environment might not evolve eyes. Life in dense atmospheres might rely on pressure waves instead of light. In methane lakes, buoyancy and viscosity could shape bodies very differently. Intelligence itself, so central to human self-understanding, might not be a common outcome. It evolved on Earth under very specific circumstances. Alien life might explore entirely different adaptive strategies. Despite this diversity, there may be certain convergent pressures. Wherever energy gradients exist, organisms will evolve ways to exploit them. Wherever chemical resources are available, metabolism will adapt to make use of them. If multicellularity offers advantages, then groups of cells or analogs may evolve. If communication provides benefits, signaling mechanisms may appear. These convergences could produce recognizably lifelike features even in systems built on unfamiliar foundations. The search for extraterrestrial life reflects not only scientific curiosity, but also a deeper desire to understand our place in the cosmos. We look for biosignatures, gases like oxygen or methane in exoplanet atmospheres that might indicate biological activity. We study the chemistry of meteorites and ancient rocks. We send probes to icy moons and rovers to Mars. These efforts are grounded in evidence, but they are also driven by a quiet question. Are we alone, or is life a natural outcome of the universe's laws? If life does exist elsewhere, discovering it would change our understanding of biology profoundly. It would show that life is not an Earth-only phenomenon, but a cosmic one. It would reveal whether alternative chemistries are possible and whether evolution follows similar patterns under different conditions. It could rewrite our definitions of life and expand the boundaries of what we consider possible. Even if extraterrestrial life remains undiscovered for many decades, the very act of searching invites a broader reflection. Perhaps life, wherever it arises, is the universe's way of exploring its own potential. Perhaps it is the natural consequence of matter and energy reaching certain thresholds of organization. In that sense, alien life, should it exist, would be a distant cousin shaped by the same physical laws that shaped us. And as you think about life beyond Earth, a quiet realization may settle in. You are an observer on a small planet around an ordinary star, wondering about beings you have never met and worlds you have never seen. The fact that you can ask these questions is part of what makes life extraordinary. Awareness itself is a rare phenomenon in a universe of dark matter, empty space, and silent stars. Whether or not life exists elsewhere, your curiosity connects you to the vast unknown. As you drift toward rest, you can hold this gentle truth. Life is a possibility woven into the fabric of the cosmos, and you are one expression of that possibility, brief, fragile, and filled with wonder. Chapter 10. So what is life? The quiet answer. After exploring chemistry, information, evolution, energy, boundaries, and awareness, it might seem that life should now reveal itself in a single clear statement. But one of the deepest scientific lessons of biology is that there is no single property that captures life completely. Instead, life is a tapestry woven from many threads, each essential, each incomplete on its own. To ask what life is to ask how matter organizes itself into something that maintains structure, processes energy, remembers patterns, adapts to change, and in rare cases becomes aware of its own existence. The quiet answer is that life is not a thing, it is a process. A set of ongoing relationships between matter, energy, and information that persist for a time against the pull of disorder. Scientifically, life is best understood as a system that maintains itself far from equilibrium. This idea comes from thermodynamics, which describes how physical systems tend naturally toward increasing entropy. A rock, left alone, does nothing. Its atoms vibrate, but its structure remains unchanged until weather, gravity, or chemical erosion alter it. A living organism, by contrast, is a constant flow of activity. It takes in energy from the environment, uses that energy to repair itself, builds new molecules, and exports waste. Every heartbeat, every breath, every cycle of metabolism is part of a continuous effort to resist the natural drift toward decay. Without energy flow, the structure collapses. This is not a poetic metaphor, it is a physical necessity. But the flow of energy alone does not define life. A flame consumes fuel and radiates heat, yet we do not call it alive. What distinguishes life from fire is the presence of information. Structured instructions encoded in molecules that guide the processes of growth, repair, and reproduction. On Earth, this information is stored primarily in DNA and transmitted across generations. DNA is a chemical molecule, but it is also a system of symbols. Its sequences specify the amino acids that form proteins, the shapes those proteins fold into, and the ways they interact to create functional networks. Information allows living systems to persist through time, not by maintaining identical molecules, but by preserving patterns that can be copied and modified. Life is also defined by its ability to evolve. Over generations, small changes in genetic information accumulate. Some changes persist because they confer advantages under certain environmental conditions. Others persist through chance alone. Evolution, driven by variation and selection, creates the diversity of life on Earth. Trees, fungi, mammals, insects, bacteria, all emerge from the same initial lineage billions of years ago, shaped by different pressures, environments, and opportunities. Evolution ensures that life is not static. It explores possibilities, discards many, and refines those that work. In this sense, life is not only a process, it is a process that learns, even without intention. Another essential feature of life is the presence of boundaries. A living organism must separate itself from the environment in order to maintain its internal structure. Cells achieve this through membranes made of lipids and proteins. These membranes create controlled spaces where chemical reactions can take place efficiently. They maintain concentration gradients, electrical potentials, and physical integrity. Without boundaries, life would dissipate into its surroundings. With boundaries, it can build complexity, coordinate activity, and protect its informational structures. Boundaries also define the distinction between self and not self, which becomes especially meaningful in immune systems and in higher consciousness. Integration of parts into wholes is another hallmark of life. Molecules interact to form cells. Cells interact to form tissues. Tissues interact to form organs. Organs interact to form organisms, and organisms interact to form ecosystems. At every level, new properties arise that cannot be predicted from the components alone. A single neuron cannot produce a thought, but a network of neurons can generate awareness. A single ant has limited behavior, but a colony can act as a superorganism. This hierarchical structure, with emergent properties at each level, reveals life as an expanding web of interactions, each layer building upon the one below it. Awareness adds yet another dimension to life, but it is not universal. Many living systems survive without consciousness, but in some lineages, the evolution of nervous systems allowed organisms to integrate information, predict outcomes, and experience a sense of presence. Awareness is an emergent property of biological complexity, not a requirement for life. However, in species that possess it, awareness becomes central to their existence. It allows them to model the world, reflect on their choices, and imagine futures that have not yet occurred. Conscious life does not simply respond to the environment, it interprets it. When scientists attempt to define life, they face the challenge that each definition captures only part of the story. Describing life as metabolism highlights the role of energy. Describing life as information highlights heredity. Describing life as evolution highlights change and adaptation. Describing life as a system bounded by membranes highlights structure. Describing life as emergence highlights the interplay of parts and wholes. These definitions are not wrong, they are incomplete, because life is all of these things at once. One of the quiet truths revealed by modern biology is that life does not exist as a binary category. It lies on a spectrum. Viruses, for example, occupy a gray zone. They cannot metabolize or reproduce independently, so they are not considered fully alive. Yet they contain genetic information, evolve rapidly, and influence the evolution of all other organisms. Some scientists describe them as at the edge of life, participating in the informational and evolutionary aspects of biology while lacking the metabolic autonomy typical of living systems. This ambiguity suggests that the boundaries of life are more flexible than once thought. The question of life beyond Earth also reshapes definitions. If life arises elsewhere with different chemistry or different structures, our definitions may need to expand. A universal definition of life may emphasize processes rather than molecular specifics. From this perspective, life could be described as a self-sustaining chemical system capable of undergoing adaptive evolution. This captures the essence of life as a dynamic process shaped by information and energy, without tying it to Earth-specific molecules. Whether extraterrestrial life exists or not, this broader view deepens our understanding of life as a universal phenomenon rather than a terrestrial curiosity. Another important insight is that life is deeply relational. Organisms do not exist in isolation. They inhabit networks of interactions with other organisms and with their environment. Microbes communicate chemically. Plants respond to signals from neighboring plants. Animals live in social groups, exchanging information and forming cooperative structures. Even humans, who often see themselves as independent individuals, are ecosystems of trillions of cells and a microbiome composed of countless other species. Life is not one story. It is a multitude of interconnected stories, each contributing to the resilience and evolution of the whole. If we step back even further, life reveals itself as a temporary defiance of cosmic entropy. Stars burn, planets cool, and galaxies expand, guided by physical laws indifferent to complexity. Yet within certain pockets, where matter, energy, and conditions align, life arises and persists. This persistence is not eternal. Organisms die, species go extinct, even biospheres may collapse. But life continues across generations and ecosystems, maintaining a thread of continuity that stretches back to the early Earth. This thread is fragile, but it is also resilient. Life finds ways to endure, adapt, and sometimes flourish in places that seem impossible. What then is life? The quiet answer is that life is the name we give to a set of processes that maintain identity through change. A living organism is a pattern that persists even as its molecules are replaced. You are not composed of the same atoms you had years ago, yet you remain yourself. Life holds its structure through constant renewal. It uses energy to counteract decay. It uses information to guide activity. It uses evolution to adapt. It uses boundaries to define itself. And in rare moments, it uses awareness to contemplate its own existence. When all these pieces come together, life becomes something more than chemistry, more than physics, more than information. It becomes experience. It becomes a story unfolding in time. It becomes the delicate connection between what is and what could be. And as you lie here, letting these thoughts settle, you may feel a gentle recognition. You are part of this long, unbroken flow of life. You are a moment in a lineage that reaches back billions of years and a link to futures you will never see. You are a pattern held together by energy, memory, and structure, aware for a short time of its own existence. Life does not need you to define it. It simply asks you to inhabit it. And as you drift toward rest, you can let the question soften, knowing that you are already living the answer. Thank you for spending this time with me, friend. I hope your mind feels a little lighter and your breath a little calmer. If you're still awake, you're welcome to stay. There's another gentle journey waiting for you right here on the channel. And if your eyes are closing already, I wish you the sweetest dreams among the stars.